Continuing on from the previous video about again, the core subject of the video and the previous one is radical chic, the Irish branch of radical chic, and I'm talking about the Irish hip hop group Kneecap. But I'm trying to give a background to the culture that they're leaning into. And where I finished off in the last video, I was talking about Freddie Scappaticci. He was the head of the internal security unit of the IRA, and his job was to extract, investigate and interrogate suspected informers within the IRA. And he was an informer himself. He tortured men, possibly executed them himself, I don't know. But he's probably responsible for the deaths of 30 people. And I can remember this very well. It used to happen very frequently where you would find, in the Irish news, anytime this happened, it would be the headline story. A body would be found in the countryside somewhere in Northern Ireland, or sometimes the bodies were dumped across the border in Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland itself. And yeah, you would see the police and probably the army there and forensic examiners walking around where this body with a blanket over it. You just see the feet, the shoes of the body in some wet, laney country road, you see. A very dismal time in Ireland. And that's before you get to the bomb. So that happened quite a bit. The other thing that would happen was every so often you would hear, every few days you would hear of a British soldier being shot by the IRA or a member of the RUC, the police force in Northern Ireland, which is essentially a British police. Was a British police force. And then there was the tit for tat killing, bombing. There was bombings, so the IRA would blow up an army, try and blow up an army barracks, or a mortar attack. They were very good at making homemade mortars. They would attack some police station, armies. They would put bombs under in culverts. A culvert is it's like a channel going underneath the road. It's like a part of the road. When you drive over it, you don't even notice it. But if you're standing in the field and looking at you might see where a stream goes underneath the road. It's like a tunnel. It could be just a pipe, or it could be if it's an old culvert, it's like a stone archway. So they used to stack these culverts with explosive, and if there was an army Land Rover or truck or a police Land Rover, when it drove over the culvert, they would detonate. There was lots of stuff going on. And that's the backdrop of Kneecap's Mean Streets backstory. Yeah, that's what they're leaning into. But as I said, they were only, the oldest guy in the group was only possibly 5 when all this generally finished. And even if you're generous and say, okay, he remembers some of it, he was still a child, maybe 8-9 years of age. He was probably 7 or 8 years of age by the time the whole thing was gone, you see. And then the other two didn't see this at all. Now, that's not to say that there wasn't dissidents, there wasn't murders in Northern Ireland, political murders that they would have seen. There was ongoing political violence in the form of riots and stuff, but as far as the conflict went, it was over. And the simple fact of life was that Northern Ireland probably was a safer place to be than metropolitan Dublin was in the 90s. there was probably more gangland murders in, there's no probably, there certainly was, there definitely was, there might be 7 gangland murders a year in Dublin, and there might be only 1 political murder in Northern Ireland. So Northern Ireland didn't have, there was the paramilitary groups, the combatants that were involved in criminality, but compared to, let's say, the south of Ireland, where there was at that point there was a history of organised crime, especially in Dublin. Northern Ireland was a safer country, safer piece of geography to be in than, let's say, Dublin or maybe an Irish city. And that's Kneecap's problem. There is the rest of our backstory then seems to involve around the typical street life of the 90s in any city in Ireland or England. Yeah, taking pills and smoking ganja, drug taking, petty crime, and that type of backdrop would not have been alien to any young person in Ireland at the time. So at that time I would have been, in 1990 I was 15. The year 2000 I was 26, the end of the year 2000. So the 1990s is when I entered adulthood, you see. I matured as a man. I entered my late teens and matured and my mid 20s, so I basically matured when that was my adolescent years. So I mean, their background is no more different really than what mine would have been back in the 90s. And there's one other character. Again, they're not unique. To be fair to them, they're not unique in that regard, this contrived nature of their act. I mentioned House of Pain in the previous video. And House of Pain were, again, when Kneecap caused controversy there a few weeks ago, they were in, I think it was in the Coachella festival in America, and I think they chanted up Hezbollah or something like this during their act, and that's what caused the controversy. And they were targeted. They were. One of them was charged. I think his nickname is Makara, which means my friend, and he because they said this phrase up Hezbollah, they were accused of promoting. He's going to go on trial for promoting terrorism, if he hasn't already. I don't think he has already. Which is a stupid thing to do, because now they're actually going to give him the street credibility that he didn't have. But they didn't. When I heard this story, when I saw this story unfold, and I done a bit of research into other hip hop groups, and yeah, this is a constant feature of them. And I remember House of Pain. There was when people did start talking about the fact that they weren't really Irish. I thought it was. My memory of them was that I thought maybe that's what kind of ended them as a hip hop group, but apparently it wasn't. They conceded this. I mean, they never actually hid it. I found an interview of them that was done in 1991, and they were quite open about this, that their Irishness was not really anything to write home about, and they just weren't worried about this at all. They kind of their attitude was, well, that's show business for you, and their attitude was, well, that's hip hop for you, you know. they understood. Like they just basically said, well, how are we different to any of the other hip hop groups? Our story is BS. They all are, basically. That's what their point was. So in that regard, Kneecap are nothing new. It's a busy day today. So, but they do remind me of one other musician. And this is, when I first heard of them, this is what they reminded me of, before the controversy. I live in a quiet area, but there's a junction outside my house, and all the traffic, all the emergency service traffic to the hospital tends to go along this road from this part of Eindhoven. So, getting back to Kneecap. Kneecap, so they're no different from any other most hip hop groups in that regard, but they do remind me of one other artist, and that artist is C6 Steve. So if you don't know who C6 Steve is, he's an American musician, and he appeared on the scene in Europe around, I don't know, 2010. After the crash in 2008, I saw him around that time in Ireland. He was on television show called The Late Late Show, and it's a talk show with music. It's on every Friday night for 2 hours. It's the longest talk show in the world. It's the longest running talk show in the world. It's going on since the 60s. And it's credited with basically transforming Irish society. There's a saying, there was no sex in Ireland before the Late Late Show, which is total bullshit, but it'll give you some idea of the regard it is held in. But one time, back in around, it could have been somewhere between 2009 and 2011, they had this American artist called C6 Steve, and he was doing the festival circuit for a long time after that, but I remember watching him on the Late Late Show and seeing he played his music, and then the presenter of the show had a chat with him, you see, and he was telling his backstory, and he was telling that he was saying things like, I grew up he had this long southern drawl, like, I don't know, from the southern states, this type of drawl. I grew up during the Great Depression, and this is the way he's talking. He has this trucker's cap, a long beard, these denim dungarees. So he looks kind of like a hobo / redneck, and he has this. He's talking about growing up in the Great Depression. Now the Great Depression were in the 30s, you see, and I think C6 Steve is only 71 now, or maybe let's say he's 75, you see. So he was, I think he was born in 1951. Now I remember. So that was 20 years. 20 years after it was 23 years after the Wall Street crash, which was the start of the Great Depression. So he was, he was born during the Korean War. Europe was was entering a boom period at this time. The West was there was a lot of. In fact, that period was really the start of the golden age for Western economies, there was a huge expansion in the middle class. So in America, you had the I can't remember it. The GI Bill, I think, where there was discrimination in the GI Bill. African American soldiers didn't benefit from it, but basically soldiers coming back from the war had subsidised education and training, and there was a huge economic boom in America in the 50s and 60s. I think that's probably the area where America peaked as a nation. You had the 60s. So the point is, C6 Steve grew up. He didn't grow up during the Great Depression. He grew up during the. He's a boomer, and he's probably the most privileged generation in America. The generation of people that had the luxury of being able to become hippies and stuff like this. And I'm subscribed to a YouTube channel, I can't remember the name, but there's a guy, he made a documentary about people who were around in the 80s. He made a documentary of people who were hippies in the 60s, and now they were in the 80s when he made the film, they were very conservative, you see. They were like your mother and father. They were responsible people, you see. And many of them did grow up in the Great Depression. Some of them in the film, and some of them were the children of people who grew up in the Great Depression and served in the war, and they had this summer of love and all that excess. And people born in the 50s, most of them were like C6 Steve. So C6 Steve was of this generation of privileged people, and even if he wasn't privileged himself, the economic opportunity was there. He wasn't going, as somebody said in one of these this documentary I'm referring to, in America at the time, being the 50s and 60s, you couldn't fall too far, even though some people probably did, but most people couldn't fall too far. C6 Steve was one of these people, and that's who, when Kneecap came on the scene, and C6 Steve, like I said, his backstory didn't add up with the timeline. He was born decades after the Great Depression. He was born 10 years probably after the Great Depression ended. And that's what Kneecap are. So again, why did they do it? They need a radical backstory, radical chic. Yeah, it's and then of course they will embrace the Palestine cause, which I think is a just cause. Don't get me wrong. But why do you embrace this cause? Is it because it's a just cause? Like I said in one of my earlier videos, is there justice underpinning your actions, or is it just because it's what the in-group do? And to be fair, Kneecap do live, there is a huge amount of solidarity in Northern Ireland among the nationalist community with the Palestinians. And they are from the nationalist community, so, but I still can't shake the feeling that it's sort of, the motivation is not justice, it's just what the in-group are doing. Because when the ironic thing about Kneecap is, in many of their acts, their audience there's a good chance, especially in England, their audience might be actually English people. privileged English people. So, yeah. So that's Kneecap for you. I think there's nothing more to say about it except that, yeah, it is, but they're not unique. They aren't unique, and the only thing, their act isn't bad. I should acknowledge that, and I should acknowledge that what they're doing with the good, they're promoting the Irish language, which is under huge pressure. It's in danger of dying out. So that's good that they do that. But on the other hand, there was a very positive story came out of Northern Ireland a few years ago. That people and the story was that people in East Belfast, which is a loyalist enclave, the enemies of nationalist Ireland, there was growing numbers of people in East Belfast learning Irish, or developing an interest in Irish. And I think if you want to save the Irish language, it has to be disassociated from politics. And if people who are loyalist and people who identify, Irish people living in Northern Ireland who identify as British and Irish, who are interested in the Irish language and wish to learn it and do learn it, that's a huge step in the right direction. The right direction being peace and stability. And what Kneecap do, their act doesn't. It's not going to appeal to people like that at all. I believe it would just alienate them. So, are they promoting the Irish language, or are they alienating the people